community in June of 2018 as the first Associate Vice Provost for Design and Innovative Strategies. He works closely with Tom Childs and with David Quigley in the Provost's office. In an organization which prides itself on its traditions and its past, Boston College, his position is unique in that by virtue of its title, it's planning for the future. I think we're going to have an opportunity today to look into the future of Boston College. It's only going to be 20 minutes of a PowerPoint, but I've had the opportunity to talk to Sunand several times, and I'm excited about this, and I think you will be as well. So I'd like to turn it over to Sunand Bhattacharya, please.
Thank you, Bernie. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen without further ado and get this thing going.
There we go.
Okay, so in presentation mode. Great. And wonderful. So good morning. And what I'm going to cover are a couple of things, and I'll, as Bernie mentioned, the context, and then get into why we are doing what we are doing and what does it mean and what we have done so far, and try to pack that into the time that we have. So as Bernie mentioned, I'm relatively new to BC. And prior to that, I was in the private sector with the corporation Autodesk, where I looked after a group called Learning Strategies and Learning Futures, actually, and my title was Learning Strategies. But I also have a background in higher education. Prior to that, I was a tenured professor, and then I kind of defected to from academia into the private sector, and we can talk about that when Bernie asks me questions. So the term design gets thrown around quite a bit these days everywhere. And I just want to kind of explain what the context is in connection to BC. There is design, the profession, the graphic designers, industrial designers, fashion designers, media designers, engineering designers. But the small d over here is the process, the verb. And it's about the process of design and innovation, how it is inclusive in nature, how it needs to be inclusive in nature, so that we can create solutions that will help us kind of create a better planet. So that's what people like Tom Childs, David Quigley, as well as several other colleagues on campus have been trying to kind of foster over here. And how do we nurture this culture of design and innovation across campus is one of the collective responsibilities that all of us have. And how do we bring about art, design, science, technology, evolving mindsets, learning expectations for planet and life-centered design? And when we look at any campus, any American university, you can actually draw a very neat perspective grid, and you'll find all these departments are very neatly kind of boxed within the grid. And our thinking is, can we do things to blur those boundaries and leverage the capabilities of each of these specializations and disciplines? And for that, BC actually, much before my time, recognized the need to help kind of relook at what we have been doing so well, but what can we do for the future students? So as you all know, those of you who've been here for prior to 2013, the VPR was tasked to develop a strategic vision for research at BC. In 2014, a design firm called Continuum was brought in, and it had lots of different kinds of reactions where people are wondering, what does a design firm have to do with academia or academics over here? Long story short, after a year, one of the outcomes of that was the notion of introducing complex problems and enduring questions, the core renewal, which has been a very successful introduction, and it's grown sizably over the past few years. And that was how design, at least the notion of design, came here to stay. And in 2017, as you all know, the Schiller Institute for Integrated Science and Society was introduced. And then 2018, we kicked off the design and innovation strategies over here. And that's how my position was created. And we are over here right now in 2020. And 2021, as you know, we'll be introducing BC's very first engineering program, human-centered engineering, for which work is going on. I'll talk about that a little down the line. So one of the outcomes was, the Schiller Institute, and now we have Laura Steinberg, who's joined us as the executive director, who is working in terms of crafting and working on this particular strategy to create this well-equipped central hub that will promote research and collaborative learning experiences. We are going to be introducing within this building the engineering program that will be residing over here. And the third thing is, in the larger context, how do we catalyze a design-driven culture of innovation built on our values? So when you look at it, we collectively, meaning the provost's office, myself, etc., we had two things to work with in 2018. One was we needed to work on developing and implementing an engineering program at BC by 2021, which is a pretty short runway when you look at introducing a whole new discipline. And then foster a culture of design and innovation across BC, which is more long-term. And one of the things that, we started looking at what do we stand for? We have a strong, tried and tested, strong liberal arts background and a foundation that we provide our students. And that is what BC stands for. And the design-driven initiatives are not instead of this foundation. It is to layer on top of it, almost like an agnostic process that can fit into any discipline, irrespective of engineering, science, the liberal arts, theology, philosophy, etc. So we have started introducing several. The strategy was to introduce several different tactical initiatives on which we could build and ultimately create an interdisciplinary culture that will probably promote more applied research and collaborative projects, such as the engineering program that is coming up. So the goal, this scaffolding kind of demonstrates the strategy that we have in mind, so that down the line, by 2024-25, the students that we graduate will be equipped with some of these thinking processes. So what are we doing about it on a granular level? So when we started looking at this, we in 2018 were here. And we knew we needed to create this kind of mindset where people could innovate using these processes, be more inclusive, and solve problems which were science and technology driven. So as we move forward to get to 2021, what can we do? So we started implementing things that you may have heard of, are design swarms, hackathons, speaker series, courses. There's a course that has become extremely popular. In fact, I see the instructor for the course, Jyoti, over here, which is called Innovation Through Design Thinking. So in 2019, we started introducing this. This was something that David Quigley and Tom Childs were very keen on introducing, and it's part of the MCA, Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences, and it's been growing. And as you see, the construction that's going on, the maker spaces and all that will be in the Schiller Institute, we have already started some of those initiatives in Higgins Hall, for example, on the first floor. There's a whole new making and fabrication lab that is coming up, and it is being piloted and used. Machines are beginning to trickle in from the process, and we've hired a director of innovation and design for that. So on this side, you see some of the technology-driven things happening. On this side, you see some of the empathy, ethics, insights, which will be contributing towards human-centeredness happening. And all these things kind of culminate over here. The goal is that a student coming in, whether they go through this blue route of, let's say, engineering, or another route, any discipline in terms of integrated science and society having that approach, our graduates will be coming out with these processes, these methods to be better innovators, be more responsible and more inclusive, which is what the world needs. So that's the strategy behind this whole thinking. In 2018, we started introducing design swarms. The very first one was part of the REU students, the science students, and with Sanofi Corporation. And they were working actually at the time on how can vaccines be transported in countries in Sierra Leone, etc., where the climate is hot and humid. So and how will the end user be able to use it? So they took the end user as the prime, as a starting point and worked from there. The course that was started in 2019 is in the art department, and the art department was very generous in providing us the space. And we can see these students have been coming up with various different solutions, working with the School of Social Work on the refugee project, or the Lynch School of Education on the Smart Greenhouse project that Mike Barnett runs, or the School of Nursing. So each time we've been trying to bring in a problem, a live problem from one of the schools, so that these students can work on it using this process called design thinking. And these are the other initiatives that we've had, the speaker series. We also did last November a sustainable fashion in the circular economy with the help of Julia Devoy in the Lynch School of Education. My point being, there are several different initiatives going on which we are trying to use and co-create with students. It's very important for us to include the next generation students because they are the who. We're designing it for them. And when we create a new engineering program or other amenities at BC, having the students be part of solving the problem helps us immensely. We also introduced this whole gaming canvas where people can use this process, like it's part of the class, where people can then use that to solve problems and take into account the multiple variables that govern any project. This past summer, with COVID, we piloted in the ERA course from Lynch in terms of how can we help seniors who are not technically as kind of their affinity towards technology is a little different from perhaps the hipsters of today. How can virtual assistants be made easy to use for this population? Because typically when these are designed, people don't take into account the end user. So this class has worked and came up with some really stellar ideas to solve a problem such as this. So each time we're trying to get a socially impactful problem that is current and work with that. We have also used this for our Board of Regents meeting. So typically our meeting with these board meetings are everybody sitting around a table and trying to kind of come up with their ideas and discussions take place. So Tom Childs, myself kind of broke that and we got them to get up and work together to kind of help craft what the future employer is looking for. What does BC need to have? Because these are people who graduated from BC, are very familiar with Boston College. And then how can we kind of use their abilities? And the results were really very meaningful. We've kind of collected all these things and classified them because this is what's going to help us create new programs using the design thinking approach. But to do any of these things, one needs to look at also the trends and indicators that kind of crafts the future. So when you look at it, there are various trends happening to the vocabulary, for example, on a simple level. We are using terminologies that 10 years ago that were not as in vogue. User-centered design, design swarms, hackathons, design thinking, creative problem solving was there, of course, inclusive design. So a lot of changes happening. Students who are coming in are coming equipped and are knowledgeable of these things. So changes in education is very important. Is it an option or a necessity? My feeling is it's a necessity. BC feels it's a necessity. And to do that, we need to look at the who, the shifting mindsets of the next generation, the innovation trends that are happening all around us in schools, et cetera, not just in America, but in different countries, and effects of technological advancements. So as we look at it, the who, our user, so to speak, I'll tell you a little story. This is Jacob. Jacob Sperry didn't quite fit into the normal school system, and his parents put him in a school called New View Studio in Cambridge. And Jacob has severe ADHD. And by the way, we have permission from Jacob to kind of use this. And Jacob has to can focus only when he has something to fidget with. So from an early age, he started coming up with something that would serve his purpose. And he came up with something called the GY rings. Long story short, he tested it, made 3D prototypes. He was the user and he designed something for himself. But he didn't stop there. With the help of his father, he got this piece manufactured, packaged, created a website, and today this product sells at Target and Barnes and Noble. My point being, this is our next generation. This is Generation Z. Generation Z has got characteristics that are quite different from us, and they are our students who'll be coming in. So we need to be prepared for them and not just adequately meet their expectations, but exceed their expectations when they come into higher education. Their world, their thinking is quite different from perhaps ourselves who are bald and gray haired and all, speaking for myself. And when you look at the turbulence around them, there's lots going on in their universe. My life was much simpler comparatively. We had the educator in the center, we were on the sidelines. That has flipped. And this learning universe is something that we are going to be creating an environment for, pedagogies for in the future as educators. So, and this young person will be BC's next student. This is happening across the world, not just here, as I mentioned. It's happening in Africa, it's happening in India, it's happening in many countries, and people are hungry for these kinds of initiatives to happen. This is an organization that BC, we work with called Agastya Foundation, which is the largest in the world in bringing science to the underserved. New View Studio has students now graduating and who have made it even into the White House. These two high schoolers have created a hand-cranked wheelchair. And now both these students are doing very well. Kate is at Brown, doing a double major at Brown and RISD. We created a hand drive. Sorry, let me get this. So what are Generation Z expecting from higher education, from a curricular experience? We've done some research work and come to kind of 6 categories. I won't get into that right now, but I'm just trying to say the who is very important as we come up with ideas and solutions and look at their attitudes. And when you look at that, this Generation Z has some pretty specific expectations from higher education. That's the piece that we are trying to address using design thinking for the future. Because they're not just artists, they're not just engineers, they're not scientists, they're not designers, they're not social scientists. They are all of the above. The boundaries are getting blurred. So can our departments also take advantage of it, the wealth of knowledge that they have? It's something that we need to create as a culture. And this was an old PowerPoint, but today, COVID has brought us to this point where real-time collaboration like this, Zoom, people working together, problem solving, is becoming the norm. Classrooms are multidiscipline. And I think in the Schiller Institute, the architects, the facilities groups have been trying to create these kinds of collaborative classrooms. And technology has also changed, is changing. There's the Internet of Things, there's immersive designs, there's factory of the future, there's robotics. All these things are happening simultaneously. Can we prepare our students for this world? We applied this to creating our engineering program as well. And the way we went about it was looking at this young lady who'll be graduating in 2025, and we have to prepare them for jobs that do not exist. And as an engineering student, this person will be coming out just FYI, within 2-hour driving distance. There are 5,871 students every year graduating as engineers. So how will the BC student be able to, what will that student offer to the world? What types of industries and employers will be there in 2025? What kind of talent will be needed in 2025? So we kind of have used design thinking to address this whole development process and come up with a major, the human-centered design. So engineering. So along with the engineering rigor and capabilities, we are going to be building on what BC stands for, where there is ethics, there's reflection, there's being able to present, communicate for industries of the future, which are new startups are coming up, automation, robotics. There's a lot of analysis that's gone into creating this particular program. And when you look at it, how we created this was we looked at it from the students, the future students, high school students. We've interviewed them, their parents, um, competition, um, other institutions out there, experts. So looking at this holistically is how we created the human-centered engineering. And that is being launched right now as we speak. Students have started applying for it, and this will be there in fall of 2021. So all of the above cannot be done in closing. All of the above cannot be done without thinking. We need to be designing responsibility for human-centered, life-centered design for a better planet, designing for social justice, and focusing on unintended consequences. A lot of these things are already happening, have been going on for a while. School of Social Work has been doing some really meaningful projects. When you look at Lynch School, when you look at MCAS, School of Nursing, Theology Department, all these places have been doing work which kind of aligns with us. So the ingredient was already there. So the work is now how do we curate this and create something where we can bring about radical collaboration for the future of making and learning, and ultimately looking at the opportunities and the challenges which are our game changers that are on our near future horizon. So on that note, I will kind of end and give Bernie the opportunity to take the stage and perhaps ask questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Sunand. As I mentioned at the outset, this is fascinating. We're getting a glimpse at the future of Boston College. Even the lexicon that now is becoming the norm, as Sunand mentioned, things like student-centric teaching is different. Transdiscipline teaching, different. This is new, things that we will be learning, and it's going to be exciting. But let's take the next few minutes and find out how you came to be here, Sunand. We'll talk a little bit about what you'd like to share about your personal life in terms of where you were brought up, what significant people, issues, values impacted you in your early life that drew you into the really interesting career that you developed that we'll touch on as well. So if you'd like to share with us for a few minutes, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So I had been in the corporate world, employed by public companies. And one of the things I started noticing that I was living quarter to quarter in terms of earnings release, which is the culture of most corporations. And often we forget what we stand for, what brought us to the forefront in the first place. So I met one of your faculty members, Mike Barnett, who was doing a lot of work in inner city schools through his greenhouse project. One thing led to another. He informed me that Tom Childs was working on this side on the Schiller Institute, as well as the engineering program. And Tom had a lot of interest in the design-driven thinking. So one thing led to another. Tom and I met and started consulting for BC. And then this position was created. And it's been great to be part of the team that's been working on all these progressive notions. So I was born in DC, and my father was part of the Indian government and a diplomat. And then we went back to India when I was 6. I grew up in India for most of my adult, to my adult life. Did my first master's in India. And then after working for a few years, I came to graduate school in the United States. And then I got an academic appointment in Illinois. And then I actually left 3 months after I got my tenure. There was an opportunity that came up, and I felt I was young, perhaps a tad bit impatient in wanting to do things. And I felt myself going round and round in circles in meetings at the university. And so I And so that's how I kind of moved to the corporate world. But now, having been there, having worked with places like Olin College of Engineering and MIT and other places in trying to create something for the future, and being a futurist also at Autodesk, I figured that all these capabilities could help us do what we're trying to do, where there is already a moral compass and a socially responsible compass, which is BC. How can we add these other pieces to truly catalyze and grow this whole culture of design and innovation? It is not instead of it. I'm pretty careful something that's already there. So that's kind of my journey over here.
Were there individuals in your life that you could describe as mentors, or people that provided you with a certain perspective on life?
Yes, definitely. So I've been very fortunate to have been able to work globally. And as one travels to different cultures and especially in underserved areas, you find somebody who has been doing something so meaningful that it has impacted XYZ, a number of people, students, etc. Olin College does a lot of work. Olin College of Engineering is next to Babson, does a lot of work overseas through a course called Affordable Design Entrepreneurship. And I was lucky enough to be part of that. And through that, I saw something happening in India along with the Babson and Olin students, where this gentleman had created a foundation which has been very successful. He left a lucrative position at Goldman Sachs and went back to India and started Agastya Foundation. And his name is Ramji Raghavan. And Ramji has created this whole area that has been impacting millions of students. And the single piece thing that he works with is bringing science and being able to nurture that innate creativity. So if he can do that at scale and bring that about, his method is something that I kind of go by and trying to bring about those examples. And people are hungry already. Students are hungry for knowledge. These students are going to push us. So how can we stay 2 steps ahead and kind of bring about the kind of provide them the creative opportunity so that they take things forward. So people like Ramji have been very meaningful to my life in terms of how we move forward. And there's several other people.
Thank you. Last week, I had the opportunity to join a webinar on Jesuit higher education post-COVID-19. And it was an international seminar. There were several people from Jesuit universities in the States, Mexico, and Spain. And it was very informative for me because I learned that there's a lot going on in these different countries, and they're quite advanced, in some cases, perhaps even more than we. How do you see globalization tying into the work that you're doing right now?
Oh, very much so. And in fact, when I joined, I was reading what was on the website about Schiller Institute, global work, the work that Phil Landrigan is also doing with public health, and a lot of the service tours that take place at BC, learning all about those things. So globalization is very important. The study abroad that happens on one level, but I think there's opportunity with some of the initiatives that we have, like Pulse, and several other ones that we have. Can we go in from the elite institutions that we are aligned with into some of these places where we can truly learn from and design with the people's solutions rather than for the people? Most times what we do is, whether when we look at poverty or we look at different cultures, we design a solution, go back and test it, come back, refine, go and and that's kind of a back and forth thing. Sometimes things work, sometimes things don't, and people accept and work with it. But there's an opportunity for us to learn from the different cultures and to work with them to come up with the solutions, just like Jacob had a solution for himself. So that it's a very important area. And I think Zoom will actually in some ways open up some of those opportunities where technology is available. Technology is getting democratized quite a bit. So I'm really optimistic about what we can do with engineering and working and students learning from other parts of the world and coming up with solutions for a better planet. I'm really optimistic about it.
Great, thank you. We mentioned earlier that BC is a traditional institution and very proud of its past. It's distinctive in terms of its core curriculum. How have you found the faculty? Now we'll consider this Vegas, whatever you say here stays among this little community. How have you found the faculty support in terms of radical collaborative teaching, transdiscipline teaching, things like that? How has that been going?
So faculty, especially in the context of engineering, have been extremely, faculty are wanting to do things. Deans are wanting to do things. I've not heard one thing where it says, well, that's all well and good, but we're doing what we're doing. Mm-hmm. I have had quite the opposite, where faculty members, chairs, deans asking, what can we do to help and participate? They see this big building coming up in front of, next to Campion, that's coming, and which is exemplifying how people can come to this central place and collaborate. So we know that this desire is there. Faculty members have been wanting to collaborate, and I've been lucky enough to be able to collaborate with several people from the various different professional schools, as well as the arts and sciences. And so that is there. Now what we need to do is the how, that we truly fulfill and create meaningful alliances. And it is not about what I bring to the table. It is about how these things get democratized and move forward on their own. So for example, Bernie, the work with Lynch School, the ERA program, that is going on its own. I mean, I had, I kind of fueled it in the beginning, but then there onwards, I have kind of stepped back and it's taking off. And people have now an investment and a skin in the game from the different programs. School of Social Work, School of Nursing have individuals are working on it. So it's been very gratifying. People are wanting to do things. I mean, that's the differentiation that I see over here from other places. And people have a moral compass that they have built their theories on.
That's wonderful to hear. What, from your perspective, being a futurist, what do you see as the major academic challenges facing the university in the next 5-10 years?
So I'll focus on academic challenges, because challenges like, funds, resources, that is aside. We have really very capable people who are handling that at the leadership level and the trustees. Academic, being able to truly understand who is coming in and making sure that we can truly cater and design experiences with them so that these students going out are really responsible contributors to the world. And to do that, when we look at K through 12, there's so many changes taking place. Even the inner city school, when you go to Roxbury, for example, a school in Roxbury versus a school in Lexington, there are differences in terms of resources they have. But cheaper technology is actually enabling those students to be better equipped as well. They're becoming competitive. So if they were down here, they've come up here, and their expectations are high from institutions of higher education. So I think recognizing those habits, those mindsets, those expectations, those three things, and giving them the facilities to be able to create whatever they're doing, irrespective of their discipline, is going to be our biggest, challenge. And the second part of it is, how can our colleagues, ourselves, be creating pedagogies and experiences that cater to that mindset?
Great, thank you. I have a couple of more questions, but I'm going to ask our guests to begin to think about questions that you have. If you could put them in the chat room, then Carolyn will help us identify you, and we'll be able to use the last few minutes to answer your questions. What was your biggest surprise in coming to Boston College, Sunand? Something that you didn't expect?
So when I came to Boston College, I first and foremost was not familiar with the Ignatian approach to education.
Mhm.
And I, one of the things I learned was digging deeper into it was that it is not something out of the ordinary. There are a lot of thinking that went in that needs to be done to do the right thing. But that following that route, that process, lends so much meaning to learning, to learning.
Mhm.
And in my earlier academic involvement with other, let's say, at other institutions, state-based universities, etc., I did not see that cohesiveness. I did not see a foundation. So that, and I knew it theoretically, but I did not know how well it was ingrained. So that's where that found, in one of the scaffolding diagram that I
Mhm.
showed,
Yes.
that foundation really struck me as being solid. And I also realized it was not about bringing change. It is about first building something that is on top of something that is already there. Typically, as a designer, I've always in my past operated, well, we'll bring about change.
Mhm.
But this is not that. This is growth
Mhm.
to keep up with things. So we're not throwing out what was there. We're building on top of it because the ingredients are already there. The analogy that I use is of cooking. It's a We have a test kitchen of sorts. We have a well-stocked larder of spices, etc. How do we cook? What kind of menu do we offer these students? So learning the depth of what was happening over here was a very pleasant surprise for me, and I'm very fortunate to be part of the whole group here.
Great, thank you. Um, Last question from me. What's been your best day here yet at BC? You've been here since June of 2018. Does anything jump out at you?
Actually, yes. So, what started as something in our Wall House office about engineering, for example, and when we diagrammed everything in terms of what we wish to do in 2021, it was just a germ of an idea with a few people working on it. That has progressed over here, and we got the approval from the EPC committee, which oversees any new program coming in. And then, just 3 weeks ago, I was working closely with John Mahoney's group, the admissions group,
Mhm.
and got to see these applications. And it suddenly occurred to me it's a reality. And the number of students interested in wanting to change the world, um, whether their scores match up or not, is a different conversation altogether.
Mhm.
And scores don't tell you everything, but those essays do, the keywords that they've put in. And some of the students, the hardship that they come with, and they've overcome those and wanting to be part of BC. So it was really moving for me to see that reality and where they're coming from and how eager these students are to be part of this human-centered engineering program. And they have other opportunities. We are not the only one.
Mhm. Uh,
That made my day.
that's wonderful. Yeah, and we're up around, I think, 35,000 applications, so we will have a good selection from which to
Yes.
take, hopefully. Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions. Carolyn, could you check the chat box and identify folks?
Yep, that actually leads right into Steve Dalton. Steve, if you want to introduce yourself to Sunand and ask your question.
Sure. Hi, Sunand. It's good to see you again,
Yes, Steve.
MVP. Um, I'm thinking you already began to answer the question to some degree, but I'm curious with this redesign, this whole rethinking of education and an integrated approach, how is that going to impact the admissions process? How will it affect, or will it affect, how you vet applicants going forward? How you measure, will this student fit into this model that we're trying to implement?
Right. Thank you, Steve. That's an excellent question. And, COVID has actually done some really good things for us also. I mean, I recognize all the very sad and, other things that are happening. But one of the things it's done is it's asked us to look at things differently and recognize what we have, what we don't have, and build on certain things that we need to be doing. So admissions, for example, admissions in the past depended on scores, SAT, ACT, etc., and the essay. Well, this year, that is not possible for many students. So the admissions group is I've been now in the inner workings of it and really appreciate the progressive nature of how they've been moving. And it's a very well-oiled machine. And for that big ship to change in a short period of time is very difficult. And they have managed to do that very successfully. So they moved the scores out. And I think scores, as I go through some of these application package working with the admissions group, I've noticed scores kind of tell you one piece of it, but that's just a fraction of the story. A whole person is described by their story, the essays that they write, and the key words that they use. And I think there's a lot going into now looking at those very carefully. So we have the general common application essay. And then for engineering, for human-centered engineering, we have a separate question. And between those two, we've been able to kind of capture what the student stands for, and will the student be successful in doing what they're doing, not just in grades, but being able to change the world? Are they coming in with that passion? Are we able to recognize that through their essays? And their whole in the social impact approaches that they have, they don't need to be engineers, they're students if they'll be coming in. That's our job. Mm-hmm. So Steve, going back to your thing, I think we need to look at admissions, not just BC, but everywhere to do that. I think BC is right ahead of the curve. BC's also done something else. It has contracted to Quest Bridge, which is an organization that brings students who are from underserved communities, but who have talent and who have capabilities over here. So there are a couple of things that are happening in admissions already so that we can have a more diverse background, so diverse from a socioeconomic point of view, from a gender point of view, and from a background point of view, so that mix is important. Being able to gauge their abilities is important, and not just depending on the scores. So those changes have to take place, and they are taking place.
Thank you, Sunand.
Sunand, a question that you may not be able to answer occurs to me. I took the opportunity to take a quick look at the faces that are on this call, and the majority of us are not in the academic arena directly. We're not student teaching, we're not student facing. How might we contribute and support this effort from our perspectives? If you have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear that.
Absolutely, Bernie. I think this, in fact, when I was preparing this talk, I am part of the administration myself, even though I have this other side to me. So it is about how, as a community, how we totally, as a total community where we support students, provide experiences. And it's not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom. All these hackathons that we do, or interactions that students have, facilities that we create for them to interact with, being able to bring a notion of transparency. For example, a lot of times we don't know which department is doing what school is doing what, and how do people can get a glimpse of what's happening in those areas. Just enabling those. So it's the entire ship that needs to be working closely, from admissions down to the cafeteria to everywhere, so that we can kind of have students interact, collaborate, discuss things, almost like the Greek civilization in terms of sitting under a tree and working on things.
Thank you. It's good to hear you say that. In employee development, one of the phrases that we use when we're talking to employees across the university is that if each of us does the very best that she or he can do in their job, then that's going to contribute to making this the best educational experience for our students that it can be. And it's a lofty goal, but it's really something that we're all a part of, which is wonderful. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time. again, I hope others found this as insightful and informative and exciting as I have. And feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to just say thank you to Sunand for spending the time with us today. It was really a wonderful opportunity. So